What were you doing in mid-October 2015 while John Stamos was getting a DUI in Beverly Hills and while US Airways was being absorbed by American Airlines, leaving just 4 carriers to control most of the domestic air travel market? Your favorite Texan was doing this. And this. And this. What exactly was he rambling on about?
You're putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay!
I remember first watching this and thinking, what in blue blazes is he talking about? Then I started doing some digging around. Turns out, he was referring to Atrazine. Welcome to the Flooded Basement channel. Today, we're diving into the evils of Atrazine. What is atrazine? It's a herbicide, it's used in agriculture, and it's made by Syngenta. What is this herbicide's effect on plants? Let's take a look. Interesting. Surely the effects are only on plants, right? Let's see what else atrazine can do.
Mixture of pesticides causes an increase in stress hormones, and those stress hormones cause immunosuppression, which leads to the inability to respond to any kind of disease pathogen.
How awful. Where are the environmentalists when you need them?
These are both males. The one on the bottom, acting as the female, we affectionately refer to as Darnell.
Sorry to those of you named Darnell. Let's keep watching.
He's a genetic male that not only acts like a female, he lays eggs like a female.
So it's one thing to act like a female. Chemicals and pesticides can make an animal's body behave like a female too? Oh boy.
She has been exposed to atrazine all of her life.
Uh-oh. Now animals are getting different pronouns too.
You can see eggs in the bottom. This is actually her second clutch for today. She has been copulating for getting close to 24 hours now. I'm very excited about the science and trying to understand the mechanism. But on the other hand, I am worried. This is the most common contaminant in ground and surface water and drinking water. And the level of atrazine that it took to make this male turn into a female is 3 times less than what's allowed in our drinking water.
Well. Let's replay the last few seconds of the video in case you need to hear it again.
It's 3 times less than what's allowed in our drinking water.
Who is this guy, by the way? This is Tyrone Hayes, a professor at UC Berkeley in the Department of Integrated Biology. According to a study where Professor Hayes was a part of, atrazine emasculates 3/4 of male frogs and turns 1 in 10 of them into females. Those 75% that are castrated are essentially dead because of their inability to reproduce in the wild. This next line is what really scared me. These male frogs are missing testosterone and all the things that testosterone controls, including sperm. So their fertility is as low as 10% in some cases. And that is only if we isolate those animals and pair them with females. In an environment where they are competing with unexposed animals, they have 0 chance of reproducing. In other words, they're done. Their lineage is finished. Atrazine can enter the human body a few different ways. Orally, through the skin, through the respiratory tract. Around 80 million pounds of this white powder, that is atrazine, are used on American crops every year. This is a known endocrine disruptor, being ever present as one of the most commonly used pesticides in the US. Atrazine is used in such large quantities and so frequently that it has consistently gotten into our water system at dangerously high levels. We as humans are exposed to pesticides such as atrazine without knowing it and without our consent, with many of them ending up in our tap water, the water we shower and bathe in. While you may not be a male frog, you may very well be a male human, or know a male human. In men, atrazine reduces luteinizing hormone, LH, which is responsible for stimulating a man's Leydig cells, which produce testosterone in the testes. That is to say, when LH levels are low, so are your testosterone levels. What about miscarriage? A questionnaire of 2,000 farm couples was conducted, which found that if the male did not use protective gear when applying herbicides, the odds ratio of spontaneous abortion in his female partner came in at a whopping 5.0, basically meaning that it's 5 times more likely to experience an abortion with exposure to these herbicides than without. Wait, there's more. Another study found that semen quality was significantly lower in males who have metabolites of atrazine in their blood. The leading cause of infant mortality in the United States is birth defects. A total of 30 million births were studied between 1996 and 2002, when the month of the last menstrual period, referring to the time of conception, was between April and July. Women were significantly more likely to have a live birth with a birth defect than in other months. The study concluded that a significant association was found between the months of increased risk of a birth defect and increased levels of nitrates, atrazine, and other pesticides in surface water. Another study found results that revealed a significant increase in breast cancer risk with medium levels of atrazine and high levels of atrazine. An article from the Journal of Pesticide Reform reported that Syngenta admitted that workers at its St. Gabriel, Louisiana facility developed prostate cancer over 3 times as often as other Louisiana men. All but one of the prostate cancers from this group occurred in men with 10 or more years at the plant. The most disturbing part was that the workers were almost always less than 55 years of age. Prostate cancer risk usually increases with age, not when we add atrazine to the mix. Syngenta kept information from the EPA for years until the Natural Resources Defense Council learned about the study and asked the EPA to get the information from Syngenta. Syngenta? Why does that sound so familiar? Well, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video, they are the manufacturers of atrazine. In 2012, they were the defendant in a class action lawsuit and ended up paying $105 million for over 1,000 water filtration systems related to atrazine in the water. After paying this massive amount of money for these systems, Syngenta denied any wrongdoing. Well, at least they stick to their guns. If we rewind to 2004, Syngenta sponsored a study investigating the impact of atrazine on the frogs, and what unfolded? The study, financed by Syngenta, couldn't replicate the findings of the contentious frog research. Interesting. Don't look so defeated. Atrazine is also applied on roadway grasses, golf course turf, residential lawns, and Christmas tree farms. Atrazine has also contaminated surface water in the US, lakes, rivers, streams, to the concern of the EPA. Atrazine could also remain in the soil for months and can migrate from soil to groundwater. The longest of the many studies and articles I read for this video has over 20 authors who defined demasculinization as a, quote, decrease in male gonadal characteristics, including decreases in testicular size, decreases in sperm production, and decreases androgen production. The feminization of male gonads is the development of oocytes in the testes. This same study concluded that atrazine interferes with male hormones while increasing the effect and production of female hormones. These effects occur across vertebrate classes such as fish, amphibian, reptile, and mammal species, according to the authors. Exposure to atrazine decreased mating behavior and sperm production in male salmon. Findings were found nearly identical in amphibians. In rodents, it resulted in as much as a 50% decrease in sperm count and decreased sperm motility. These are some of the other reproductive effects of atrazine in rodents: induced abortion, impaired mammary development, the induction of reproduction and hormone-dependent cancers, impaired immune function, and impaired neural development. The authors of the study also mentioned that low fertility, low sperm count, and poor semen quality were also associated with atrazine exposure in humans living in agricultural areas. Atrazine is found in virtually all the nation's waterways at concentrations of 0.1 parts per billion or above, 16 to 20% of the male frogs developed extra testes or even ovaries. Testosterone in the blood of adult male frogs exposed to atrazine was only 1/10 the amount compared to unexposed males. They also developed smaller larynxes, organs that are important for frogs' sexual communication. Another study found that preschoolers ingest traces of atrazine after researchers took samples of their drinking water. The samples found atrazine in the drinking water 130 children in North Carolina after sampling water at home. Those that attend daycare had their water measured at home and in the center. And remember, it's in the soil too. These are the main foods we recommend you buy organic to lower your exposure to atrazine as much as possible. Macadamia nuts, anything with sucrose in it, anything that contains corn, sorghum, which is a grain that can be turned into cereal, granola, bran, cookies, and syrups, and pineapple. Tyrone Hayes was hired by Novartis, which turned into Syngenta, in 1997 to study the effects of atrazine on frogs. They asked him to manipulate and misrepresent data once he found the effects on their hormones and sexual development. When he declined to do so, they hired scientists to refute the data. They also hacked into his email and knew his whereabouts.
Company coming to presentations that, or lectures that I was giving to make handouts or to stand up and refute the data, and eventually even led to things like threats of violence.
Let's control the science.
Or at one point he threatened my wife and my daughter with sexual violence.
Syngenta's public relations team had drafted a list of 4 goals. The first was, quote, discredit Hayes. In a spiral-bound notebook, Syngenta's communications manager, Sherry Ford, who referred to Hayes by his initials, wrote that the company could prevent citing of TH data by revealing him as non-credible. He was a frequent topic of conversation at company meetings. Syngenta looked for ways to exploit Hayes' faults and problems. Syngenta, which is based in Basel, Switzerland, sells more than $14 billion worth of seeds and pesticides a year and funds research at some 400 academic institutions around the world. Hayes published his atrazine work in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences a year and a half after quitting the panel. He wrote that what he called hermaphroditism was induced in frogs by exposure to atrazine at levels 30 times below what the EPA permits in water. He hypothesized that the chemical could be a factor in the decline of amphibian populations, a phenomenon observed all over the world. We and our principles have been tested, and I believe we have not only passed but exceeded expectations. Science is a principle and a process of seeking truth. Truth cannot be purchased, and thus truth cannot be altered by money. Professorship is not a career, but rather a life's pursuit. The people with whom I work daily exemplify and remind me of this promise. He and his students continued the work, traveling to farming regions throughout the Midwest, collecting frogs in ponds and lakes, and sending 300 pails of frozen water back to Berkeley. In papers in Nature and in Environmental Health Perspectives, Hayes reported that he had found frogs with sexual abnormalities in atrazine-contaminated sites in Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, and Wyoming. The PR team suggested that the company, quote, purchase Tyrone Hayes as a search word on the internet so that anytime someone searches for Tyrone's material, the first thing they see is our material. The proposal was later expanded to include the phrases amphibian haze, atrazine frog, and frog feminization. Searching online for Tyrone Hayes now brings up an advertisement that says Tyrone Hayes not credible. Since the mid-70s, the EPA has issued regulations restricting the use of only 5 industrial chemicals out of more than 80,000 in the environment. Don't you love the fact that they're looking after us? In 2003, a Syngenta Development Committee in Basel approved a strategy to keep atrazine on the market until at least 2010. Syngenta began holding weekly atrazine meetings after the first class action lawsuit was filed in 2004. In 2005, Sherry Ford, Syngenta's former head of communications, made a long list of methods for discrediting him: have his work audited by a third party, ask journals to retract, set trap to entice him to sue, investigate funding, investigate wipe. At his talks, Hayes noticed that 1 or 2 men in the audience were dressed more sharply than the other scientists. After seeing an email in which a lobbyist characterized them as, quote, black and quite articulate, he began signing his emails Tyrone B. Hayes, PhD, ABM, for articulate black man. Syngenta intensified its public relations campaign in 2009. That year, a paper in Acta Pediatrica reviewing national records for 30 million births found that children conceived between April and July, when concentrations of atrazine in water is the highest, were more likely to have genital birth defects. The author of the paper, Paul Winchester, a professor of pediatrics at the Indiana University School of Medicine, received a subpoena from Syngenta, which requested that he turn over every email he had written about atrazine in the past decade. Anne Bryan, Syngenta's senior manager for external communications, stated that atrazine does not, and in fact cannot, cause adverse health effects at any level that people would ever be exposed to in the real world environment. Recently, I've noticed more people, especially men, showing qualities usually seen in women. Also, more people are saying that they belong to a different gender or that they like someone of the same gender. At first, I thought this was just how things are changing, and because I think it's important to be patient and kind, I accepted them as they are. However, what if these shifts in behavior and physiology are not entirely natural? What if they're the result of chemical influences administered without their awareness or consent? Could it be that their very genetic makeup is being altered, perhaps through chemicals in the water supply? It's baffling to consider why regulatory bodies like the FDA or our government would permit such chemicals when there are studies highlighting the consequences. You can see how people like AJ here can make the leap, no pun intended, and connect this topic with population control, New World Order, Bill Gates, etc. There's definitely the possibility for more nefarious reasons. In Europe, by the way, it has been banned in the EU since 2004. Not here.